Okie doke. So, what we're going to tie here is the famous copper john. So, what you see in the vise, as far as a hook, is I've got a lightning strike up. I'm trying to shake it loose so you can kind of see it, and it's not working for me. There we go. It's an NW3 size 14. The NW, I had a question on one of the last videos. The NW just means nymph wet, and the number 3 is the style of hook. So there you go, for whatever that's worth. The bead that's on there is a copper Cyclops bead. You could use lead, you could use tungsten. And if you've been kind of following along with the videos, the way you want to read this here is this is a 7/64 diameter bead. The number in the middle is what we're concerned with. So 14 so this bead pairs the best with a 14 hook. That's what the middle number means. A size 12 means the bead's going to be just a little bit undersized, and a size 16 means the bead's going to be oversized by a little bit. When you oversize your beads, now they may or may not slide off the front, so just be careful of that when you're pairing your beads. So the thread that I'm using is Unithread 80 Black. And so let's get started. I'm going to start my thread right behind that bead, and I'm going to put in 10 to 15, 20 wraps, somewhere in there. And what I want to do is kind of build just a little bit of a taper, just right here. The bead's still going to move around a little bit, and we will deal with that later. If you have trouble splitting your biots, because what we're going to do here is we're going to add our biots for the tail first. Leave your tag long and wrap it back, and I wrap it towards me on my side. And so this will work regardless whether you're a right-handed tire or left-handed tire. And I'm using touching turns to take my thread back to the barb. Just before the bend. We don't want to get into the bend. You can kind of see when I hold my thread straight up and down, I've got just a ever so little that's still straight right here before it starts to curve down. And you don't want to get into there. So I want to kind of move this down and out of my way. I'm going to add about 4 or 5 wraps right on top of one another, right at the back, to create a little bump, just like we've done for the for this entire session to split the help split the biots for the tail. So next, I need my brown biots, and I'm working from the back. Okay, if I scoot this forward, you can see how this kind of works into a tip. When you flare these open, they're kind of short, and if I work my way down, they get a little bigger. So when you're working with biots and you're new to working with biots, I definitely recommend that you work from the tail side forward. The tip side of the biots are great for smaller flies. Say you get down to like an 18 or 20, these size are going to, this size biot's going to be great. But for what we're doing here, and for just practical purposes and how easy they are to use, we want to get the bigger biots. And I think I showed this on one of the other videos, but what I'll do it again, is I'll kind of flare these biots open and get to kind of pop 1, 2. Okay. And I'll grab those biots, maybe. There we go. Kind of going to stick out to the side. I'll grab those biots, and I'm going to remove the stem from the biots, not the biots from the stem. Meaning I'm going to use my left thumb here, left index, to grab the biot stem, and I'm going to use this to pull and leave my right thumb, right index in place. You can do this either way. It doesn't matter. I mean, we can flip this around and do the same thing the opposite direction. Just means I'm going to leave my left thumb, left index in place, and remove the stem that way, like so. So either way is cool. You'll see there's a little bit of a bow there. No big deal. We're going to come in and all this little geef here in the back, we're going to trim that out. Just like that. So we have a couple biots there. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lick my right thumb, or my left thumb, left index, so I can kind of get some grip on those biots. I'm going to do the same thing with my right thumb, right index. I can separate them. I can pull them apart, and we want these tails to flare out. So I want to have these back to back, or the convex side facing one another. Now you can see that I've lined these up just like this. So this is my thumb, my index, and my middle finger on my right hand. And again, you can do this on either hand. And we're going to just transfer them over with a little pinch. And so we have something that looks about like that. With your fingers being wet or damp, it'll allow you to kind of shift these back and forth to line up the tips. So if you need to line up your tips, you can do it with your fingers damp. The biots can be pretty slick, so give that a shot. Next, what I want to do is get the distance from my tail, because these are going to be the tail. And on the copper john, you want it to be about 3/4 or just a little less, somewhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of the distance of the hook shank, and maybe even more specifically from behind the bead to where the thread is. So we're going to actually, so if you did it from behind the bead and you went 3/4, you'd be about here, right about there. So you need to determine what's going to work best for you, but in all reality, you want about that distance. Okay. Now, if you can't quite get that distance and you're working with biots for like one of the first times, that's no problem. You can take your distance from the front side of the bead. So you line it up and pinch it together like that. Well, I say the front side of the bead. It would actually be just behind the eye of the hook. But that is the front side of the bead. So, anyway, see, they start to slip. So I'm going to lick my fingers again, just so I've got them damp and I can actually kind of grab a hold of them like that. I'm going to line them up. That bead is wanting to move, so that I've got them right about where I want them, at about 1/2 to 3/4 of the distance. I'm going to transfer the distance, and I'm going to take that distance right where I pinched and put it down right on top of this little thread nub that I did. Now you're going to see that these biots extend past the bead. And the one thing I can honestly tell you is when this happens, this bead's going to really create havoc. So I'll take my scissors, kind of line it up straight behind there, and trim it short. So that way when I'm wrapping forward, the bead is not in the way of wrapping it forward. Now I'm just going to do a couple of loose turns and adjust my biots so that they stay on the side. Now, you really want these biots to stay on the side the best you can, and the reason why is because we want a nice underbody for the wire. So you can kind of see I've got them splitting the hook shank kind of like so. Now I'm just going to hold on to the tips of those tails. I'm just going to slowly work my way forward, making adjustments where I need to, when I need to. If your biot's right up high, do a loose wrap over, pull down. If your biots are riding low, do a loose wrap under, pull up. And that's kind of a key to biots. But we want to have a nice underbody here because the wire, or a nice wire abdomen is going to kind of depend on that. And so we're going to take this thread all the way up to right behind the bead. And just tie it all in, just like that. And so you should have something sitting like this. Now, if your tail is collapsing, mine's collapsing just a little bit, what you can do is take your thread back, and we're going to do this just so I can show you. If yours is already sitting just like this, leave it the way it is. And wait 45 seconds so I can show this. I'm going to bring my thread all the way to the back. I'm going to do a loop around the back, coming up underneath and in between, pulling forward, and bring a wrap around. And what that did, you can see, is that split that biot to out to the, I guess this would be my right side or the far side. And now we can take this tag, bring it up the opposite side, and this is why I said keep it on your side, so that you can really gauge. Now you can really open that tail up, just catch it in with a wrap, and wrap this forward. So if your tail's sitting shallow or close together, no big deal. It looks good that way. If you want yours a little more flared open, then you can do it that way. It takes a little practice, but so does everything fly tying, right? We'll come in here and trim out the thread. Make sure you don't wrap all the way behind the bead, so you can sneak your scissors in there and trim that out. Cool. So now that we've got the Copper John's tail in place, that's like 3/4 of the battle, right? Can be. So next what I'm going to use is a small copper wire. And I'm going to pull out probably just so that I make sure that I have enough, and to make sure I get my fingers around it and work it efficiently and effectively. I'm going to line it up against my ruler. I always have a ruler sitting handy. And I'm going to kind of line it up. I know I can't do this part on camera, but I'm going to get about 7 inches. I'm going to take my wire scissors. I do have wire scissors. These are specifically for wire. Basically, they were nice scissors that got trashed, and so, over time, and so now I use them for wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick this copper wire on the bottom side of the bead, right up in there. Let me put a couple more wraps in. So you can see that wire is sticking inside the bead. I'm not pushing it through, it's just inside. And next I'm going to methodically use touching turns, and I'm going to keep that wire on the bottom side. I've had questions that have asked, why do I tie the wire on the bottom side? And the reason for that is because most traditional patterns call for the wire to be on the bottom side. Now there are some cases where it doesn't matter so much whether you tie it in on the near side or far side. But one of the key things, though, is when you tie it in on the bottom side, is that first little half or quarter wrap is going to be kind of ugly, and it's going to be underneath, and so you're not going to see it. So say you were evaluating a fly, that wire is going to start from underneath. Here's another example where you can see my wire started on the side, or just off the bottom side. So what it allows you to do is get a full turn, or at least 3/4 of a turn of wire, as opposed to like a half turn or something along those lines. So anyway, next, as I wrap my thread back, I'm going to watch where my thread lays. Now, if my thread goes too far back, you're going to start to see the biots or the biot tail move. And we don't want it to move. You want your thread to go right up to the back side of those biots and not have these biots move. If the biots start to move, that means you went back a little too far, and just back off a turn. You know, you can always go back. There's nothing that says that you have to keep that thread wrap in place, and so just back off a turn. Next, I'm going to start wrapping my thread forward, again, kind of methodically. I want this to be as symmetrical as possible, nice and round, even on all sides. That really helps with wrapping the wire. And I'm going to take my thread all the way up to behind the bead. And the reason for that is because I'm going to wrap my wire all the way up to the bead. And then we're going to wrap back to where we need it to be. So the first wrap of wire is the most crucial. And you'll see that I'm bringing my wire to the back side of the fly. And you're going to have to kind of watch what you're doing here to make sure that wire doesn't start bending that tail either. And so the first two wraps are typically the toughest. You can see how I don't know if you can see that or not, but my wire's wanting to go across to the back. You don't want it to do that. You want it to rest right next to the first wrap on the front side. And once you get 2 or 3 wraps in, it's not a problem. Okay, so now I've got 3 wraps in. If you want to try to tighten that up, okay, that wire's not going to go anywhere. My hands are free. I can take my nails, scooch them together. And I've still got my tail open. If it collapses a little bit, don't worry about it. We can always split this open at the very end of the fly and glue it open. So when you're wrapping wire and you want to keep it tight, this is a place that I see a lot of people struggle with, and that's okay. But if you notice how I'm angling my wire just towards the back so that the back side of the wire is just touching the front side of the last wrap. And when you do that, that is going to allow that wire to, or it's going to make the wire want to touch the sides of one another. And so don't be afraid to flip it over. You can see I've got a little gap right there. If you want to fix that, you can kind of do it the same way. There you go. Close it up a little bit. Is it crucial to have it super tight? No, not crucial. But you do want to have, I mean, it is the copper john, and you do want to have it, you know, pretty solid copper right here. If you wanted to get crazy, you could start adding some counter ribs and stuff like that, but we'll save that for another video. If you want to see how to add a counter rib on a wire body, you can check out my brassy video. And so we're just going to slowly and methodically work this up so that the wire, again, is always angled just a little bit to the back. And you can see it lays itself pretty well. This is just kind of a test of patience here. You know, if you have a rotary and you can turn it over, do that. If you want to use the rotary function, make sure that you put a half hitch or a whip finish in right here, a couple turns, so that your thread doesn't keep going all crazy on you. And then you can kind of rotate it like this if you want. That way it actually gets the wire a little tighter. But you can just kind of keep going just like this, and we're going to wrap this guy all the way up to the thread. And I do that for a couple of reasons. One is it's going to help build up some bulk behind this bead that's still moving. And two, I don't have to second guess where my thorax is going to start, which is what we're going to put in here in just a second. So all the way up. Now, the easy way to tie this off is I've been coming from behind the thread. I'm going to jump the wire to the front side of the thread and put one wrap in. And now that has got the wire on the front side, so I can just literally take my thread over the top. I don't have to crisscross applesauce, none of that good stuff. And I can just sit there and just wrap this guy up. And every time that that wire is getting caught, you can see that it's getting worked into the bead there. So now I can, excuse me, with a little dry throat tonight. But now I can just helicopter that guy off, just like so. You can also trim it out if you need to. Next, what we need to do is get to, well, we have to come back to the third position. In the third position, I'm going to kind of jump quickly there, is about right here. That's where our thorax is going to be. Okay? But we're going to wrap this guy back. And I'm going to stop about halfway there. And I'm going to get my pearl tinsel, or, mirage tinsel works great. And I'm going to pull out. Oh, you really don't need much here. So if you have scraps from another fly that are, a half inch or more, if you can use that material, go for it. Absolutely. So I'm going to grab that material, my tinsel flash, my pearl tinsel flash, and you'll see that it's got this little bend to it. And so what I'm going to do, the way I like to do it, is I like to turn it so that bend on the back side is facing up, and I'm going to stick this front end here inside the bead. And I'm going to wrap that in a couple of turns, and I want to make sure that this stays on top of the back. And I'm going to go back to about that third position where we kind of, right, just what I showed you, where I kind of jump back. So now you can kind of see that this back half here is going to be the copper part of the copper john, at least for the abdomen portion. And this front half is going to be the thorax and everything else. So next, what we need to do, now, and again, right here, you can use a ton of different materials. What we're going to do, since this is the Beads and Biots series, we're going to use a black biot. But this is going to be the actual base color for the wing case. And so I'm just going to come in, I'm going to pull out one, and I'm going to tie this tip forward. Now, we don't have to cut anything off in the back or anything like that, but I'm going to tie it in, tip forward. You want this to be wider than your tinsel, okay? And so I can just kind of put it right along the top of the back, hold it in with my thumb, put a couple of wraps in, and if I need to adjust it from there, I can, so that it's also sitting right on top. I can pull my tinsel right out the back to see if it's sitting right in the middle, and it is. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, methodically wrap forward and just capture all of that in. If you're not sure if you have it all, you can fold this to the back if you need to, and wrap right over the top till it lays down flat. When you do that, though, you've got to still come in and get it out. So if that's the way you decided to do it, you can get your handy dandy fingernail clippers, and now we've created that little V-wedge that I always talk about. We wrap the material forward, flip the material over, send it back, and then wrap to the back. That really locks this little biot in place here. So now you should have something sitting about like this. Okay? Cool. Next, we got to get some Peacock Curl. And for the Copper John, if you got some Peacock Curl that's shorter, this is a great place to use your shorter Peacock Curl. Sometimes if you're like on the Prince Nymph that we just did in the last video, you may need your longer Peacock Curl. But if you come through there and you say, hey, I've got some short guys here, kind of, you kind of see this one. I don't know if you can see it, but like those couple right there, they're a little shorter. We can totally use those right here. And what we're going to do is I've got about 5 here. We don't need 5 for this, but I'd say you want 3 or 4. And we don't need to get the tips super aligned either. If you can pull them out and they look about like that, that's good. What we are going to need to do, though, is come in and cut them short. So I still have, a good 3.5, 4 inches before I get to any butt of my Peacock Curl. The butt meaning this little white part that came off the stem of the feather. So we're going to tie these in tip side forward. And I'm going to tie them in right on the side. I'm going to put a few wraps in here. And before you get to the front, make sure you come in. If it's extending past the bead, make sure you cut this material off on the back side of that bead. And now you can take your thread and keep working it forward to right behind the bead. Cool. And this stuff is all still hanging out back. Now, you can wrap this over as is or palmer it, just like this, if you wish. You can also take it and start to twist it. When you twist it together, what's going to happen is the stems of the Peacock Curl are going to start to kind of reinforce themselves. So you can do that by licking your fingers and just twisting. Or you can also, if I can find it, there we go. You can also kind of just collect it and get your hackle pliers on there and slowly twist, just like we did on the Prince Nymph. So what we're looking for is this to, right in this area, to twist together. And then take like a little toothbrush or your fingers, just be careful not to break them. And we're going to tease that out just so that it flares and looks all nice and pretty when we wrap it forward. And now I can wrap that forward. Don't be don't be afraid to take your fingers and draw all that material to the back, so you kind of get this little bushy Christmas tree, or I've seen so many people call it so many different things, but that kind of effect where it's nice and bushy. And each time you go around, you want to stop and make sure you twist your Peacock Curl again. And we're going to send this thing right into the back of the eye. And what that's going to do is help lock this bead in place. You can kind of see this bead doesn't want to move much anymore. So I'm going to get that over. I'm going to put one extra one in. Really, really get it snug between the back side of the bead. And now I'll come over with my thread. And I'm going to cross it right on the back side. I've got 2 wraps in on the back side. Now I'm going to pull my Peacock Curl to the back. Whoop. And I'm going to place about 3 or 4 wraps right in front. If you're still not sure that that's caught, don't be afraid to pull your Peacock Curl back forward and put a couple more wraps in like that. So you've kind of wrapped it this way, wrapped it that way, wrapped it this way. And now, you're going to be good to go. This is going to come off. The easiest way I found to get, take these off is to literally just take my fingers and I'll kind of pinch it here and with my thumb and index, right thumb, right index, and I'll take my right middle finger and snip. You can kind of look around to see if you have anything sticking out. Yep, I got one right there. I can bring my fingernail clippers and trim that guy out. So, the legs. This is probably the hardest part of the fly. What I'm using here is some olive dyed pheasant, and I just, you can get some really interesting effects from the pheasant on the copper john. The thing I like about using this particular part of the pheasant, which looks like this, comes down just below the neck, or comes off of just below the neck, down into the upper back of a ringneck pheasant, is that I've got these brown tips, because that's really what I'm looking for. And so you can go through and select your feather. You can try using longer, longer fibers. You can use partridge. The partridge is a great option. You can use female ringneck pheasant. Tons of ideas that you can use for the legs. But just to help at least peace for my mind, right? As I'm going to come through and I'm going to get rid of all this fluff in the back. Now I can grab everything. I can draw that 90 degrees and see how long they're going to run. So this is going to be pretty long. The better you get at this, the more you can use the tips of these feathers up here. When you're first trying to tie it, don't be shy and just use the longer stuff, and we can pull it out. But I'm gonna draw all these barbs to the back, so I've kind of got this little jet plane shape. And I'll come in and I'm gonna trim this out. I know it's getting long, but we're getting close. So it's like that, and the reason for that is just so it doesn't get in the way. Next, I'm going to reverse that back in my fingers, and I'm going to pull an even amount off of either side so that I've got this little V. Now, this is kind of the tricky part, and you may have to play around with this a little bit. I'm going to set this right on top, and I'm going to kind of pinch it along the sides. I'm going to do a couple of loose wraps over, so that it's sitting something like that. And we're going to pull this forward. If you pull it forward without pinching these barbs down, these things are going to twist on you, guaranteed. So what I'll do is I'm going to pinch with my left thumb, left index, and along the back. And I'll use even my middle finger here on my right hand to kind of stabilize everything. And I'm just going to slowly draw. And I'll pull a little bit, see where it's sitting, and now I can come in with my fingers and adjust those feathers where I want them. We kind of want them on the upper side, kind of like that right there. And I think personally they look really good if they're just about right at that distance there. Right about at the tail length, that may be just a touch long, but I can kind of move them around. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to pinch, and I'm just going to just gently pull. Something like that. Now, once you've got them aligned on the side, before you make another wrap, take everything, pinch it with your left thumb, left index if you're right-handed, reverse that if you're left, and just take your thread and just kind of cinch down on it. And you're going to get them to flare open like that. Okay, oh, that flared a little high. We kind of want them off the side there. So they're sitting about like that, okay? If one side's a little longer than the other, don't worry about it a whole lot. You can try to adjust it a little bit if you need to, but don't worry about that. Next, I'm going to take the whole entire feather. I'm going to draw it to the back. I'm going to jump my thread on the front side. I'm going to put a couple wraps in. And again, I'm going to come right back and pull this forward. Put 2 more wraps in to lock all this in place. And again, I like my fingernail clippers here. I'm going to come in and trim that out. And anything left over that I don't like. Alright, so if you've made it through that part, the rest of this is easy peasy. First, we're going to take the black biot and we're going to bring it directly over the front so that it's lined up over the eye. I'm just doing this on the side so you can kind of see. One thing I'll do is I'll take my thumbnail when I've got it lined up, and I'll use the eye, and I'll kind of, you know, pinch that on the eye so it doesn't move on me. Yep. Just like that. I'm going to put a couple of wraps in over top. Again, we're going to come back and put a few wraps in on the front side as we draw this back. Now, before I trim this, I'm going to grab my flash, bring it right over the middle, and I'm going to do 1, 2 the same way. I'm going to split them. 1, I'm going to grab everything. 2, and now you've basically completed the copper john. So all we've got to do is trim this out. And again, I'm going back to my fingernail clippers. I trim them out one at a time because it's easier and it works a little better. And I can just start placing some thread wraps right over the top of one another, taking a look at everything. Well, this might be the longest video I've done. Copper john can be pretty tough. There's some delicate techniques into this. So anyway, now I get my whip finish and come in, put 3 or 4 whip finishes in. I definitely suggest using some sort of glue for the thread. Now, you can use crazy glue here, or your head cement or whatever. What I like to do is use solar res here, or a UV resin. And I'm going to go right on top. You got to be careful. I'm just going to put a little drop. Turn it upside down if you use the if you're going to use the UV resin, and work it to the back. If you do it all up top, it's going to sink down. It can mess everything up. So make sure you flip the fly over. And as it's sitting upside down, give it the old zap. So that way you're getting your thread, your wing case, and your flash all in one. And once you've kind of zapped that, we can, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the camera. You can add just a little tiny bit more to give it that little bubble look right there. Flip it over, zap it again. That bubble look is horribly popular with a lot of nymphs like this, and as well as the copper john. So if you're using UV resin, do it that way. If you're going to use crazy glue or some cement, you can just come in and just dab your thread like so. You don't need to use both like I just did. I was just kind of showing you. And there you go. The copper john, hopefully made easy for you. I hope you found that to be somewhat easy of a tie. It can be sort of difficult to learn and sort of intimidating. Oh, and I told you I'd show you this too. So if you need to split your tail open and it's collapsing on you in the back, you can just use a drop of crazy glue again, or you can come in and take your bodkin with your solar res or whatever UV glue that you like. You can get just ever so little, open them up, split the difference, put a drop, dab it with your finger, get them to where you want it, and then zap that part too, and then those will stay open for you as well. So there you go. That's how you can kind of do that part too. So there you go, the copper john. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Check out some of the other videos. You can click the little bell below to get notified when I have new videos coming out. I kind of cover a wide range of flies. Whatever I come across and tie, it's like, hey, I'll make a video of it, and I'll put it out there for somebody to watch and hopefully learn from. If you have found this video and you're not part of Fly Tying for Beginners on Facebook, and you'd like to be, we do all kinds of cool stuff over there. We have videos, we have classes, we have challenges and get-togethers and all kinds of cool stuff. So check that out, Fly Tying for Beginners over at Facebook. There's 4 questions there, so answer those questions, and that's the key to get in. And other than that, at 40 minutes, this is definitely the longest video I've done. But hopefully that made the copper john simple for you, and it looks pretty good. So with that being said, happy tying, everybody, and we'll see you later. Take care.